Joined by political economist Siya Biniza. In fact, before I speak to Siya, Siya is joining us from our Pretoria studios. There he is. Before I speak to him, I want to show you what President Cyril Ramaphosa said about what the expectation of South Africa is and what the intention of South Africa is going into this BRICS summit. Take a listen.
Next week we will be receiving leaders from all parts of the world as they come to the BRICS summit. And as we receive them as South Africans, as we applaud the enormous standing of BRICS in the geopolitics of the world, as we applaud our partners in BRICS, we will be pushing one message, and one message very strongly, that we want them to bring the dollars to our country, to come and invest in our country here. And that is the message that we are going to be pushing.
So that's what President Cyril Ramaphosa says South Africa wants during the meetings with the heads of state from the 5 BRICS nations. Let's go to Siya Biniza. So, Siya, the president wants investment, but there's also issues to do with trade, and it's all happening in a particular context. We joined this group about 7 years ago. Have we been vindicated in terms of that decision, and can we be vindicated even further by seeing the investment that the president wants?
Sure. Look, I think since we've joined the BRICS group, we've seen an increase in terms of our exports, at least particularly to China, where the exports have grown from about 2% of our total exports to the world to where it's currently at about 9 or 10%. But as the DTI representative said, the challenge is that this is mainly steel exports and primary products. And so what we want to do is start getting integrated in some of those global value chains, or at least getting a bigger piece of the pie. Currently, we have gotten some benefits in terms of trade, little benefits in terms of investment, but there is room for further growth. Obviously, the president is trying to reach his target that he set of 100 billion in terms of investment, and the BRICS partners can or have some capacity to assist us towards reaching that target.
Yeah, in fact, Siya, as you talk about the, the content of our exports to China, of course, trade is skewed in China's favor in as far as this is concerned. Many of these exports are raw products, as you say, gold, the metal groups, iron ore and chrome ore and the likes. How do we move from that point to a point where there's demand for finished South African products in China?
Well, I think that's going to be very challenging given the forward-looking plans of China. You must have heard, obviously, the Chinese government is planning the One Belt, One Road initiative, and really that is about locating entire value chains within China. For the past few decades, the role that China's been playing has been mainly manufacturing or integrating its neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, and now it wants to relocate entire value chains. However, there are opportunities such as in automobiles. There's seen some investment from Chinese companies in this sector. That is really how we're going to start moving out of exporting just raw commodities and actually leaving some value locally in terms of manufacturing and assembly. But certainly we're still a long way ahead, but there are some uncertainties also given the foreign policy of China in that it's found that it's more effective in terms of its bilateral relations, at least on the African continent, and so really the commitment towards BRICS is mainly around prestige, something similar to what you'd consider the G7, etc., although they do have a wing that assists in terms of financing. And so really how we'll move out is being integrated into the bigger brothers, so to speak, and their value chains, and trying to export into those economies.
Siya, let's pause for a moment. Take a listen to what the Reserve Bank Governor, Siya said yesterday. The context, he was talking about what appears to be a looming trade war between the United States, Donald Trump, and China. This as they've been imposing tariffs against each other's products. Take a listen to what the governor said was going to be the impact on South Africa.
If this trade wars materialize, and there is a rise of protectionism, small open economies will feel the pain immediately. Because for many small open economies, we are hooked into global value chains. And when there is protectionism in the major markets, that means that small open economies that depends on exports can no longer sell there. I think that, yes, we will be the immediate losers as small open economies, but overall, as a global community, we will all be losers from the trade wars.
So that's the governor, Siya Biniza, speaking there yesterday. You have to agree with him, Siya Biniza, don't you? I mean, protectionism growing and also this looming trade war. The global economy is interlinked, as we saw in 2008, and the example that he was citing in 1929.
Yes, I think definitely. There's been a rise in protectionism, obviously, as the actions of Donald Trump with the Section 232 that he instated on steel and aluminium products. But also this is driven by the future plans of the United States. Given that Trump is expected to pass a bill, multi-billion-dollar bill in terms of infrastructure investment, and really the key sector or the key element to export there would be steel, because it's such a vital material for all types of construction, but infrastructure generally. And so over the couple of years, whilst China was driven particularly through infrastructure, it was importing a lot of steel globally, and that's what South Africa was taking advantage of. But I think since 2014, when China started looking internally and looking to satisfy its growing middle class, that's when the demand for steel declined and the collapse in the commodity prices resulted. And although now we're sort of steadily growing out of this, the next wave that's going to hit obviously is the impact of the protectionism. But I think in as much as this poses a challenge, and South Africa is definitely going to be collateral damage in this war between China and the US, there is an opportunity in that South Africa can reposition itself and position itself towards exporting into the continent. With the signing of the Continental Free Trade Area and the huge gaps in terms of industrialization on the continent, South Africa has got a competitive advantage. And so what we need to do is realign ourselves to satisfy the huge and growing consumer demand in South Africa, on the continent.
Unfortunately, completely out of time. Thank you so much for your insights there, Siya, and we didn't even get to talk about the other acronym letters in that acronym BRICS. But in any case, thank you so much for coming through.